Alright guys, I had to re-record the audio, so bear with me if it doesn't match up completely on screen as what you're hearing, but we'll do my best. So what I'm doing here is cutting the half laps for the upper shelf. After I got everything done and realized I really needed the supports because the slats were so thin, I had to come up with a way to do it for the upper shelf since there's only that one back apron. So what I decided was going to do a half lap right in the middle, and then create another one of these small aprons, but scale it down a little bit to kind of mimic that look. So what I'm doing right here, I just confirmed that the blade width was the right depth, and I put the piece into that actual cut just to see how deep I need it to go. Normally, I would do this all with a test piece because I'd be doing a lot of these all on the same size pieces. But for this one, since I'm making this apron a little smaller, I just kind of did it as I went. So here I'm setting up, I wanted this to be a ½ inch from the end of the piece. So I'm setting the distance of the stop block right now. You'll also notice, you've probably seen it a bunch before, I have those little cards at the end. I'm using those as shims because after the blade has been sharpened a number of times, it's not the true 1/8 of an inch. It's a little bit smaller, so this stack itself is a fraction of an inch, like a 16th or a little bit bigger than that, smaller than a ½ an inch. So I'm using those cards to kind of bulk up that space. That way I'll make one cut with the cards and then one cut without to get the total width I need. So right here, I'm measuring the depth of the cut. For this, I wanted it to go 3/4 of an inch through both pieces. So I put a little mark on the piece I'm cutting on the side, and then I'm lowering the blade down until it gets to the proper depth. The important thing for this is it's always better to be a little short because you can always cut a little more off, but if you go too deep, it's very hard to add material back on, as I've said a bunch of times. All right, so here you'll see what I was talking about with making one cut with the cards and then taking it out, then shifting the piece over against the stop again, and then taking the rest of that cut off. It's really, I'm only adding like a fraction, like I said, a 16th, maybe 3/32 of an inch to the cut, but it makes it so that is the perfect width that I need. And then once I cut it, I'm going to test fit it to make sure everything is good. So here you'll see it's not quite flush, it's sticking out a little bit, which means I need to go a little deeper with my cut. But again, it's better to be on the too small side when making these kind of cuts than it is to be on the too deep of a cut, because you can always take a little bit more off of there and make it a deeper cut. It's very, very hard to go the opposite direction. So what you can't see in this is underneath the table there is a little crank. Each full turn, I believe, lowers or raises the blade 1/8 of an inch. So I'm really only doing not even quarter turns of this. I'm just doing like one little click, getting it to just move down a hair, running that, checking the new depth, seeing if it works, because like I said, I don't want to overshoot it. And then while this might look repetitive, that I'm not fast forwarding through it since you've seen these cuts before, this is basically the setup process for if I was going to be doing a lot of these, I'd be spending the full 5 minutes that is the length of this portion of the video actually making sure that this cut is the proper dimension, it's the proper depth, the proper width, everything works. That way, after that, once I go to do those repeat cuts, I don't have to think about that as much. So I wanted to see how long it actually takes to get the proper setup. And then here I'm showing you guys, so now I'm at the proper depth. These two pieces are sitting flush, and that's the look I was going for. So now I know that that cut is all set. The little strange thing is I'm only doing this single cut here. The next cuts that you'll see are going to be on the other side of the wood, and they're going to be shallower because they're for the slats, which is a lot thinner. At one point while I'm making these cuts, I almost forget to flip the board over. So you'll see me kind of pause and flip the board. It's very important to always double check what you're actually cutting before you cut it. Because like I've said before, once something's cut, you can't undo that. So you got to be very aware of what you're doing at all times. Again, what I'm doing off screen right now is I've made that first cut. I'm checking to see if I need to go any deeper, to make sure that the width of it is good, to see if I need to add any more shims. And once this depth and width is set, I won't have to change that. The only thing I'll have to change is the location of the stop block, because I'm going to have 3 of these half laps for the 3 slats which are going across the top shelf. At this point, I added another card to my little shim stack. That way, I just wanted a slightly wider cut. All right, so again, here you can see it's not quite flush, so I still need to go a little bit deeper, so I'm going to crank it down a little bit more again. And again, it's only just a little fraction of a turn, but once you get there, it's easy for the next ones because it's then just positioning the stop block. At this point, I should be very close to the actual depth that I want. Each time I take it off screen, I'm testing the fit with one of the slats, because I want it to be perfect. There's no sense in being a little bit off when I could have just taken a little extra time and getting to actually sit flush. All right, so now it looks like I'm happy with the depth. What I didn't show before starting this video is I had marked the faces of the wood where I need these marks to go. I'm flipping it over because I'd only marked one face, and if I had been trying to line it up on where I need to make the cut, that mark would have been hidden. In reality, I probably should have just marked the other side as well. That way I would have not run the risk of accidentally cutting the wrong side, which is what I mentioned earlier. So here I have it the wrong way as I'm measuring where the stop block needs to go. Then I need to remember to flip it over, put the shims in, and then do the cut. But again, since I've already set the depth, this part will go a lot quicker because I'm just setting the placement of the cut. So what's holding the stop block, because again, this is something you can't see in the background. You can see that board that my right hand is moving right now. That is just secured to the table with a clamp. Simple as that, clamps it in place, but then each time I slide that piece of wood against it, it always registers in the same spot. Things like this are very, very helpful for doing repetitive cuts. Even if you're doing just one cut, just having that stop block there, it makes it so you know that that's where it needs to be, and you can make sure that you're in the right spot, you're square, and everything's going to work out. All right, so now I have those three slots for the half laps. So next what we're going to do is I'm going to dry fit that top shelf together so you can kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. At this point, I haven't cut that middle support piece to length yet. I just wasn't sure how long I wanted it to be quite at this point. I was also going to add some tapers to all three of these pieces right here, which you will see in the next video. So I waited until I was ready to do that to cut everything down, just because I would have been using the same saw, and it would just save some time. So what's going on here? On either end, there is the half lap with the slats, where it goes in halfway on the slat and then halfway on the apron. And then that middle piece, it's a full lap joint, meaning that the full ½ inch of that slat is going into the little apron, into the support. I didn't bother putting, I could have done half laps again, but for this one, I didn't really care if it stayed completely centered left and right. All this piece is doing is just taking some of the weight so the slats don't bend. So that's the only place it needed a little bit of support. Once it's all together, I'm just really pushing everything together, making sure everything is snug. That way it's all flush and smooth. And then here you can get a look of, this would be the top of the shelf. Again, it's not the final look, but it gives you an idea of what I was doing for this video. And those are the joints that I just cut.